Welcome to SpunTales.com, where we spin tales from around the web. This week, we finish up the season with The Falling by J.D. Phillips. The Falling is now on Amazon, so check it out. Be sure to check out the author's socials at facebook.com/authorjd and twitter.com/JD_author. He waited in his room like a good boy, to use Rita's words. He waited as the sun moved across the sky, and yet another person he'd never seen before brought him a lunch tray. Red soup this time, with something the woman called grilled cheese, though it looked more like warm, soggy bread with cheese melted by heat in between, rather than anything cooked over a grill. He thanked the woman nonetheless, and set out to pass this test same as he'd done with breakfast. He found this meal far easier to consume overall, though his stomach continued its grumbly protests all the while. He managed to down half the sandwich and nearly half the soup when Rita finally found the time to visit him again. Dark circles under her eyes and slower than usual movements told of Rita's fatigue, but her smile remained, bright as always, as she plopped down into the padded chair near his bed. He set his spoon aside and looked at her expectantly, hoping she'd come to take him down below. "It's gonna cost me a box of chocolates, some wine, and I promised to babysit for her date night, but I got Mary to agree to pick up the rest of my shift," she said with a sigh. "I'm officially free for the rest of the day." She was pleased by this, and so he felt pleased, though he wasn't exactly sure what free meant. She was still here. She was still in uniform, after all, and she didn't look as though she had any plans to leave anytime soon. It seemed funny making promises to get out of work only to remain at work after the fact, but she was happy to be here. "How about you?" she asked. "How are you?" He was restless, uncertain, relieved he now had Rita to talk to, even as it disappointed him he hadn't yet mentioned going to see Randall or the bridge man. He was also struggling to come up with the answers she wanted, as he knew she wasn't talking about any of those things. "Is your stomach doing better?" she asked. "It's noisy," he replied. "Are you feeling sick again?" He thought about it and slowly shook his head. He didn't feel as he had after the chocolate, not exactly. This was more a simple protest rather than an all-out revolt. "Good," she replied, genuinely pleased. "In your head? Do you still have a headache?" "It does ache," he said. That was true, even if the worst of the throbbing directly beneath his skull had faded. "When was the last time you took something for it?" He furrowed his brow, unclear how taking anything might possibly help his head. "What would I take?" Rita blinked in disbelief and turned in her chair to eye the dry erase board mounted to the wall across from his bed. There wasn't much to see, of course, aside from the most recent nurse's name and his decided name of Hartt. "You should have told someone you needed something," Rita said, tiny spikes of anger suddenly coloring her words. "That's what the call button's for." "Oh. They didn't want me to call them." The anger spiked higher. "Did they tell you that?" He shook his head. "Not with words." The anger shifted to something closer to bewilderment. She wasn't angry with him, never had been, but she didn't understand him as well as she wanted to either. When it came to her fellow nurses, however, she wished she understood less. "Ridiculous," she murmured. "I can go right now and make sure you're taken care of." He shook his head. "No, I'm okay." he replied. Rita laughed briefly, despite herself. Oh, sweetie, you're really not, she said. It's important we try to ease your pain so we know if the medication helps. The kind of pain you're having can tell us a lot about the state of your injury. He frowned at her. He didn't like the word medication. He didn't like it one bit, despite feeling she hadn't intended anything negative by it. But he hadn't the slightest idea why he was so bothered by the word. No, thank you, he said. It would make your head feel better. I don't think it would. Rita's anger was now bewilderment in full. Patients in her experience normally demanded medication, whether anyone felt it was necessary for a particular issue or not. And here he was, head clearly battered, declining something as simple as an aspirin. Can I ask why you don't want anything? I don't know, he replied, aware she'd grown wary of his repetition. I don't like the sound of it. She arched an eyebrow and left her thoughts unsaid. Can I see the bridge man now? He asked. Oh, I'm not sure actually, she replied. I was too busy to check down there earlier and then I just really wanted to come see you. Oh. Did that sound weird? It sounded weird, didn't it? I mean, I just wanted to see how you were doing. Okay, she whispered, smiling much too quickly. You know, I think I must have dreamt about you. I mean, I only got like 3 hours of sleep before I had to head back in here, but you're on my mind whenever I woke up. He wasn't sure what to say. Rita wasn't sure what she was trying to say. Awkward silence filled the room until his stomach whined and made her laugh. He didn't laugh. He didn't yet know how. But he did manage a smile that put Rita at ease. That a smile was enough to ease her mounting embarrassment pleased him almost as much as it did her. Can we go? She swallowed back her laughter and tilted her head curiously. Go? To see the bridge man. She opened her mouth to speak and then closed it when she couldn't decide which words she wanted to say. She didn't want to end their time alone just yet, and certainly did not want to go down below. She'd prefer to avoid the lower level as much as possible, even before the massive intake of bodies she'd seen last night. She definitely didn't want to see the dead, made worse by the unnatural stiffness and the discoloration of the skin brought on by time. Even so, she didn't have quite the heart to flat out refuse him either. She was the one who told him about the other man in the first place, and doing so sparked hope that the man's face might somehow mend the scattered bits of his memory. She didn't feel right denying him the chance to help himself, despite how strongly she loathed the thought of venturing near the morgue. I could go alone, he said. She loved him for saying that, but she shook her head. You're really not supposed to wander the hospital solo while you're under observation, she replied. Besides, I don't think anybody should do that alone, you know? There's no telling what it might bring about if you do remember. Randall will be there. Rita laughed softly. Yeah. Well, the guy didn't really strike me as the caring type, she said. Or patient. Or anything supportive, really. He was, once, he replied. When you say things like that, I always want to believe you, she said, speaking almost more to herself than Hartt. He couldn't tell if she meant that as a good thing or a bad. Mostly because she didn't know herself. But he saw no reason for it to trouble her either way. He'd only ever spoken truth after all. What else could he speak? Then you'll take me? He asked. I've got a better idea, she said, rising to her feet. Just wait here, okay? I'll only be a minute. It took Rita more than a single minute to return to his room after she'd stepped out of it, but he waited on the bed, as he'd been asked to all the same. She looked rather pleased with herself when she came back, cradling her cell phone in her hands as she smiled at him. I saw this crime show. They usually have people identify bodies from pictures instead of in person. So I called down and explained why you wanted to see the guy. And they're going to take some pictures and text it to me. He frowned. Yeah, I know, we're not supposed to do that, but that Ben guy has been after my number for so long he was willing to go along to get it, she said with a wink. I'll delete it right after, of course. It'll be our little secret. The frown remained. He'd been looking forward to getting out of his room. He'd also wanted to see Randall. No, that wasn't quite right. It wasn't a want, so much as a need he couldn't identify. I know. You're probably tired of this room, Rita said. Maybe we can go for a walk after I get this picture. Hey, maybe I can even get you down to the cafeteria to snag some real food, huh? We could ask Ben to join us, see if he's heard anything new about your bridge guy. Ben doesn't like me, he replied. He called me a zombie. Well, yeah, but not in a bad way, Rita said. Waking up like you did spooked him as all. He was just a little freaked out. He nodded, almost by reflex, already aware of the reason Ben had been upset. I'm sure he'd... Oh! He flinched, and Rita smiled, as a sudden burst of music fired out of her cell phone. A too loud pop tune of some sort he couldn't quite make sense of over the acute pain inflicted within his ears and skull alike. Rita was quick to acknowledge the new text message, thankfully ending the song as quickly as it had began. Though her smile turned into an irritated frown within seconds of checking the screen. Ben hadn't sent the promised pictures of the bridge man. That much would have been obvious to anyone looking at Rita's face. The reason he'd failed to deliver, however, was not one Rita could have anticipated. He said there's no bridge man to photograph. Like, the body's gone. Missing. He says he found one of the victims of the crash inside the unit the bridge guy had been kept inside, and now he's stupidly talking about the zombie apocalypse. He blinked once. Twice. Trying to process what she'd just said. The bridge man was gone. Missing. Did that mean he'd somehow left on his own accord? Or had someone managed to misplace him? Was that even something that normally happened in this cube room? Why? He asked. Because he's an idiot who clearly needs to watch less of The Walking Dead. Oh, you meant the body, right? The idiot thing may apply to that as well, actually. Maybe someone claimed the guy and Ben just didn't know, or it's possible someone moved him by mistake. Maybe confused him with one of the crash victims or accidentally left him outside for... I know it sounds horrible no matter how I say it. Oh my god, he's still messaging me. I never should have given him my number. He only half listened to Rita, rambling about threats Ben couldn't hear about blocking. He was still troubled by the news that a man he couldn't recall and had no name for had gone before he had a chance to at least try to become reacquainted with him. He couldn't help but feel he'd lost more than a potential lead, and the nonsensical sense of urgency said that the loss invoked nearly overwhelmed him. You know what? I'm done, Rita suddenly said, pounding her fingers against the phone screen. He's not even trying to make sense now. Hey, are you okay? I don't know. he heard himself say. The response was nearly automatic now. You still want to go down there, don't you? He didn't respond. She didn't need him to. It was difficult to believe that a body had vanished without a trace. Someone working in the department surely had to have some answers, and Ben was too caught up in thoughts and fears of the undead to bother asking around. All right, she said through a sigh. Let me try calling down there again and see if I can talk to someone less dumb. She told him to wait yet again and stepped out into the hallway. He'd waited until she'd made it to one of the phones inside the nearest nurse station, and then carefully and quietly climbed out of the bed and cracked open the door to his room. Being near the end of the hallway made it easy to step out unnoticed. He took care to walk along the side facing Rita's back toward the elevator, determined to get inside the thing and ride down no matter what he might see or hear along the way. His plan fell apart when he spotted a small group of nurses chit-chatting only a foot or so away from the elevator doors, each waiting to get on and ride down to the cafeteria to grab some lunch together. He considered sneaking back into his room before he spotted a door off to the side bearing a sign that inspired him. He'd found an entrance to a stairwell. He managed to open the door and close it behind him without incident, and wondered why the lunch people hadn't chosen to come this way. The air was cooler here, and quiet. Still. A line of stairs stretched upward to his left. Another descended before him, where there was another and another still waiting to take him to the lowest levels of the hospital. No crowds. No wait. No noise or stomach-churning floors that raised and lowered at the press of a button. Just stairs and echoing footsteps in peace. He liked it here. He did not, he soon learned, like the actual stairs. Stepping down while maintaining balance proved his greatest challenge so far, as looking down the stairway evoked waves of dizziness that threatened to send him tumbling down the steps like a fool. He had to look in order to guide his feet properly, or else he was certain he would step too soon or too late and send himself tumbling for an entirely different reason, and he did not want to have another fall. The fact that the lights overhead kept flickering as he drew near didn't help matters either. The flash, flash, flash made his eyes ache, but he didn't dare take his hands off the safety rail to attempt to shield them. He simply needed to take things slow, be cautious, and use good sense. No one knew he was in here. No one was currently chasing after him. No one, by the same token, would be here to assist should he actually miss a step and plummet. So he took all the care necessary to remain on his own 2 feet. The descent was long and laborsome, but eventually, he gained enough confidence to slightly increase his speed. He recalled the numbers he'd first seen in the elevator ride with Randy and continued on until the numbers were joined with the letter B. He'd at last reached the basement area where the morgue was located. Now he only needed to find the cube room. The acrid stench of burning tar and tobacco punched his senses before he made it down to B2 stairway. The odor grew stronger and more painful to breathe in, until he reached the top of the final staircase and spotted a man seated upon the bottom step. He recognized the disheveled gray gold hair and the navy jacket straight away, but chose to remain silent as he took a few steps closer. Randall had slipped into the stairway to smoke a cigarette, as he'd done many times before, well aware, but completely indifferent to the fact that he was breaking the law. He'd made it his refuge the day he realized the smoke detector overhead was faulty. Expecting, and some days anticipating, to getting busted when the alarm was finally fixed, but so far it hadn't happened. Randy didn't react to the approaching footsteps. He wasn't even aware anyone was in the area. Some small white earbuds connected to some sort of musical device in his jacket saw to it that the only thing Randy heard was his current song of choice. He might have remained in heavy metal bliss indefinitely if not for the loud, irritating blips of static that suddenly cut into the music. High-pitched as a mosquito and rhythmic as Morse code. Well aware such sounds had no place in the song, Randall yanked one of the earbuds out to check the environment around him, listening hard for anything that might explain the interruption. "Hello," Hartt said. He'd never imagined such a shriek could come from a man like Randall. Not quite as loud or as panicked as Ben's had been, but close enough to be placed in the same category. The cigarette flew out of Randall's hand as he tore out the other earbud and turned sideways onto the step in order to get a good look at Hartt. Hartt simply smiled. "What the fuck are you doing here?" he asked, struggling to slow his breathing back to normal. "I want to see the bridge man." Randy frowned at him sharp. "Say what?" "Rita says I fell with someone. I want to see him." Randall's expression softened slightly. "Oh," he said. It wasn't remotely close to what he wanted to say, but those words just weren't coming to him. "Do you know where he went?" Hartt asked. "Is he really gone?" Randy frowned. "How did you know?" "Fucking Ben. Ben blabbed, didn't he?" "You can still show me," Hartt said, taking a step closer. Randy shook his head. "I would if I could, kid, but like you just said, the guy's gone. I don't know when or who." "But you saw him before," Hartt said, taking a few steps closer. "Yeah, I saw him once, right after I left you last night, but..." "Show me?" Hartt extended a hand as he spoke. Randall clumsily climbed up to his feet and nearly stumbled right off the step in the haste to move out of his reach. His fear was less the thought of being touched and more the realization that part of him wanted to be touched. To find out what else Hartt might see inside him. To find out if Hartt might pick up on... "Don't," Randall blurted. Hartt stopped advancing, but kept his hand out in front of him, far enough for Randy to only need to reach out and accept it. "It was the damnedest thing, turning on the news this morning and seeing a report on that crash," Randy said, speaking so softly he scarcely heard it himself. "Damnedest thing." "I'm glad you missed it," Hartt replied, smiling faintly. Randy shook his head. "I don't know why I even did. I mean, it has to be about the most goddamn ironic thing I could have done considering..." "I know." Randy shook his head more adamantly. "Yeah, see, that's the thing. You did know. I don't understand what you're playing at." "Playing?" "I don't want anything to do with it," Randy was quick to say. "Okay? I don't..." "But you do. That's why it scares you." "See, this is what... Why do you even want to touch me? You acted like it really hurt you." Hartt nodded. "Pain is sometimes necessary," he said, unsure exactly where that thought had come from. Randall found himself considering the situation, even as he questioned what the situation really was. He didn't understand what exactly transpired yesterday, or what might have happened, though the fact he thought something would happen struck him as unexpectedly hilarious. Brown was the one who believed in psychics, the paranormal, and other bullshit. Randy had humored him at best, but he'd never believed. He wasn't sure what he believed now either, but he knew in his soul that things would irreparably change if he dared to take Hart's hand. "Please, Rand," Hartt whispered. "Please, Rand." Those two words sent a shiver down Randy's spine. The way Hartt had said them, the inescapable weight of his puppy gaze, the pouty curve of his lips. He was so much like Brown it physically hurt to look at him, and yet it wasn't possible to even look away. "Please, Rand." It was the last thing Brown had ever said, and presently, the last thing Randall heard before he reached out and gently took Hart's hand. You just listened to The Falling by J.D. Phillips. This episode concludes the season 2 of SpunTales. If you enjoyed the book, check it out on Amazon and leave the author a review. And as always, thanks for listening.